when I've applied what I've learned, whether that's put it in a slideshow, whether that's tell it to a group of trainers, whether that is just write a program, whether it's just talk to a client about it or talk to your missus on a walk. That's the bit that's probably the most important when it comes to studying, I think.
They always say in it, like, when you know your topic, when you're an expert, is when you can explain it very simply.
He wrote a program every single day for at least 15 years. At least one program. So you get very good when you write that many programs.
Like every night we go for a walk, me and my missus, and I'll always explain it to her as simple as I can. And it just helps create analogies, frames around the topics and get it across properly, you know what I mean?
If I gave you a list of foods that have B vitamins in it, you won't remember it. But if you start putting meal plans together for people that may be deficient in B vitamins, you'll start to oh, okay, this is starting to make sense.
I think that's cool, man.
And I learned that by putting it in a slideshow. So, Steve, in your professional YouTube backdrop, how's things going?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good. You know, this is my YouTube studio, isn't it? Nah, this is my office, man. I need to paint the walls though. They're a bit creamy. Need to go white.
I quite like it. I think it's clean cut. You just need a few supplement boxes there. You need a book that you've written, like instead of that home poster.
I've got my camel.
What's the camel signify?
Travels to Egypt.
That's
Plant,
cool.
books, novels, books. The missus has color coded the books, obviously, as you can see.
But of course, it's the YouTube game. It has to be color coordinated. This is how YouTubers make you feel that they're actually smart rather than actually being smart.
Yeah, the plant, vision board. I need to hang up on this wall though, because you can see that.
You're a YouTuber's dream, man. Yes, you know these YouTubers that imagine that they pretend they're really smart and they actually just talk about lighting setups.
Trust me.
I'm nothing against the lighting setup. I've got a new softbox. I should look better than I have done in a while, and a new webcam that follows me around the room. But and these things are valuable. But at the same time, it's like you got all these books. Like you didn't read all those books about lighting. Why are they all in the background?
You know what? My missus has probably read all of these books that are here. She's read them all. One, you know what I mean?
That's mental.
And I've got all these books here, business books and PT books, but
I've got one book currently in this flat. Do you want to see it? Let me see it. Oh, I forgot it follows me around. This is the only book I've got here right now.
What is that? I can't see it because it's a bit blurry.
Yeah, it's nutrition.
Oh, yeah, of course it is. Yeah, sick.
There's nutrition. I recorded a video for Instagram the other day that this would be an interesting starting topic before we get into our main one. Self-paced courses versus live courses. So I did. It took me 3 years and 2 attempts to do PM because I signed up when we were in our junior year in that basement gym, and as you probably remember, I was very broke, very very broke. So I did the payment plan option. Got about 4 months in after barely doing any of the course because it was self-paced and I just got busy, and then my card shut off. I hit my overdraft limit. So it cancelled all my subscriptions. And I just never restarted it again because I couldn't afford it. So then, fast forward about a year and a half later, I restart Precision Nutrition. And then because of that, I literally gave them 1.5 times the course fee. And it took me 3 years to do.
Fucking hell, man. What a waste of money.
Well, yeah. Man, it was a great course for where I was at the time. And if you want to learn the basics of nutrition and also learn how to get someone in shape within a 5-year period, then Precision Nutrition should go to. No offense, John Berardi. But for you, because obviously you must have done a bunch of self-paced courses, but you've also done probably more in-person education than anyone I've ever met with your masters and university degrees and things like this. What do you prefer? Self-paced, flexible, you can do it anytime, or live, turn up, learn?
Nah, live, turn up, learn, 100%. Yeah, 100%. I think self-paced stuff, you just I'm already one who procrastinates and just delays shit anyway. And to be fair, most PTs and people that I talk to, a lot of them are like that anyway. So fuck that, man. Fuck that. You just don't end up sticking to it. Unless there's tests and deadlines and shit like that, which there probably ain't going to be, is there? So
This is the reason why I've made sure that we've got a mix. Like if you because the aim of SMU is for the original name was Coaching Confidence, which it kind of still is for the main syllabus. And I was like, well, wait, they need to be confident in the craft. That means live study. However, I know, and I'm sure you understand this feeling as well, right? You go, right, I'm going to study periodization methods for strength. And you go, that's it, tunnel vision. Next 3 months, here's my learning curriculum. Here's what I'm going to do. And then all of a sudden, the client comes in with a knee pain that you can't work out. And you're like, yeah, and actually, fuck that. I need to learn anatomy. And then you dive into anatomy. And then a client doesn't follow the diet. Goes, oh, I need to understand psychology. And then you talk about psychology. And then you got a client that comes in with Hashimoto's. Like, oh God, I need to learn study. We're all very ADHD when it comes to our own education.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah, so like that's why we've now got something where people can dive into it. I'm actually going to stop this thing following me now because it's on a podcast. It's annoying, and I can see you. Hopefully that stops. Yeah.
Perfect.
But yeah, so yeah, like that's why I kind of wanted both. You can dive into this nerdy stuff if you want to, but it's live when you need it. You know, like why is it that you prefer the in-person stuff so much? What do you feel you get from that you don't get from self courses? Let's assume you did them. Let's put aside the fact that self-paced courses you never do.
I think it just the massive part of like just having something scheduled into your calendar, into your diary that you have to turn up for, study, hold you a bit more accountable, as opposed to just like doing it whenever you want, isn't it? Really, I think that's probably the main thing. And then you can ask questions and stuff as well, innit? If it's live or whatever, you know what I mean? And you can zone in on a proper topic, get like real hyper focused, and then boom.
This is why I've learned a lot from doing this podcast because it's like a live consult. Well, twice a week with you and Rob, but like with the people that come on the show. And I've learned this more. I've learned this more as I've got more confident in my craft. We were just saying before we came on air that I've had the craziest month, right? I've gone to Budapest for a mate's wedding. I've gone to Manchester for an event with TMP. And in between that, shout out to Luke Lehman. I went to Muscle Nerd seminar in Amsterdam, right? And it's always good chat to Luke. The guy, I didn't say this before we came on air, but do you know what the most amazing thing about the course was? And I'm sure you've seen this, is that man's ability for active recall is insane. So it wasn't really any structure to the seminar. It was like, what questions do you have from the course? But we got 2 days of that. And he was like, it was funny. The second day, he was like, yesterday was a bit more of a Q&A. Today, we're going to bring it all together. And then he went off on tangents and just going off on questions and answers and stuff like this, as Luke does. But he started talking about pathways for fat mobilization and beta oxidation and lipolysis. And he was just writing it on his iPad and went on the big screen. I'm like, how do you remember this to this detail off the top of your head? The guy is Rain Man. But I was saying to you, like the one of the things I took away from that course was how far I'd come. Because when I first did a course with Luke, I hid in the back and I was so blown away. Whereas this time I was been able to have discussions with him. And I think that's the value of an in-person course, is being able to test where your knowledge stops. Like it's that learning point where you can have conversation with people and you've got to have conversation about this topic you've probably been learning in your mum's basement for the last year.
Yeah.
And you now have to speak in human language to other people about this topic. It's the same way that I've learned tons from being an educator, because now I've had to put what I know into slideshows and then present that to 20 odd coaches, more on the supercharged calls, that need to understand it at their level. And that solidifies stuff. And I think that's like the best things about in-person seminars half the time is the network, the people around, and the constant conversation about your craft, which start to form your thought process.
Yeah, no, I think that's cool, man. Like they always say in it, like when you know your topic, when you're an expert, is when you can explain it very simply. And I think that's a cool way. Like I always, when I'm studying and learning something, I always try and if we go on, like every night we go for a walk, me and my missus, and I'll always explain it to her as simple as I can, and it just helps. You know what I mean? It helps create analogies, frames around the topics, and get it across properly. You know what I mean?
It's good that your missus is into training. Like my wife would zone out if I started having here's my topic of the day.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I like that. I
not that
always
she's interested,
encourage.
I'd say. I just chat a load of shit in it, really.
And she's just nodding away and smiling and being an
Probably,
absolute diamond. Yeah, yeah.
probably.
Like I yeah, like I always say to people when you're looking at studying, I do this on my Kickstart course, people. We have active study, which is like the study that we all do. It's like, right, I'm going to go in study anatomy. And I'll write origin insertion, origin insertion, origin insertion, or I look at a biochemistry pathway or whatever I want to study. And then people tend to stop there. And I often stop there and I have to stop myself because I know I should know better.
Yeah.
Right. And then after that, so that's deep study. Deep study is that bit that we all do. Active study is the next step from that, which people often stop with. Or people skip the deep study and then realize you don't actually understand the topic. They just understand what X influencer like Jordan Shallow says here. So I think we marry the two. So let's say you were doing anatomy of the shoulder, like the glenohumeral joint. You literally deep study, origin insertion to all these muscles. And then, rather than stopping there, you move on to active study. So watch a video of someone you respect in the industry going over some shoulder-based exercises and explaining the anatomy. So let's say Jordan Shallow talking a single arm row and a press, or whoever it is. Maybe it's me, maybe it's you. And going like, oh, okay, I can see now with the anatomy why that's going there. It makes sense in my head. And then the third step is what essentially is what you're doing with your missus is play. And this is what enough people don't do. This struck home for me when I did a mentorship with Tom Hibbert. And he told me about, he wrote a program every single day for at least 15 years. At least one program. So you get very good when you write that many programs. I'm like, well, if you study programming, then you do some active study on programming, and then you actually write a program, case study, an example, how much better would you be? You know, you learn some nutrition stuff, write a meal plan. Write a meal plan with somebody who has PCOS, even though that doesn't really exist. But like you can like low inflammatory things to bring down stress, maybe play around with certain foods. You'll get better at understanding it. If I give you a list of foods that have B vitamins in, you won't remember it. But if you start putting meal plans together for people that may be deficient in B vitamins, you'll start to like, oh, okay, this is starting to make sense.
Yeah,
And that's sort of like the thing that I think is the biggest takeaway from my learning is when I've, especially in the last year, when I've applied what I've learned, whether that's put it in a slideshow, whether that's tell it to a group of trainers, whether that is just write a program, whether it's just talk to a client about it or talk to your missus on a walk. That's the bit that's probably the most important when it comes to studying, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that sounds like a nice little framework. That's cool, man.
Mate, and I learned that by putting it in a slideshow, right? So in exactly the same way. Like, because obviously you've gone to much deeper levels of education than I have. Like, tell us how the university experience, certainly on your masters, differs from the other education, or does it?
Well, my master's was part-time,
Mm.
and it was all home study, yeah? So all
Mm.
online. So they dripped it out every week, and then we had to like have our deadlines every few weeks for our essays and shit. So um, it was good, but like some of the lectures, like all the lectures were pre-recorded. There weren't no lives. But some of the lecturers, they're so like fucking mundane, you know, they're so boring. The way they speak, they're like, well, how I'm speaking now.
Yeah.
They're you know, and you just like you just end up fucking falling asleep. So half of the lectures I would just fall asleep. And I'm talking like not half an hour lectures, I'm talking like 2 hour lectures on fucking chemicals and fucking ATP and shit, you know, like it's fucking boring. But some people like that shit. I liked all the strength stuff. So like when we did say physiology, right? What was cool about physiology is that the would have an introduction to physiology, and then each different energy system would be a different sport. So we'd have like 8 different sports. So the first one was weightlifting, and then it will go through all of the energy systems involved with weightlifting,
That's
all of
good.
the chemical reactions involved with weightlifting, all the work to rest ratios, and everything that's happening. Yeah, and all the programming side of things for it as well. And then the next one would be like maybe like a 200-meter runner, and then it would go down to like a 400-meter runner, or a wrestler, like Olympic wrestling, or middle distance, and then long distance, or field sports, and then we'll go through different sports. So then you learn all about, and it would talk about all the physiology required for those sports. So there's a lot of practical application and practical understanding that we had with it, which is sick because then you're actually learning it for context of athletes and sport. So that was good. So if you could put stuff like that together for people, I think that's sick.
I couldn't agree more with that. I think that's an absolutely insanely good idea. And
Yeah.
I think if you can reference it back, like I always remember this with anatomy, right? When I was learning anatomy back where we used to work. And for years it didn't go in. It was just origins insertions. I'm just like, I just don't understand it. It was only when somebody got me on, I think at the time it was a leg curl, and they posteriorly tilted my pelvis, and they gave me a cue to drive in. And I was like, oh, I get it. I see it. In the same way when I Akash, shout out to Akash from R&T, got me to feel my lower lap for the first time by driving my elbow in at the end of a single arm row. And I was like, oh, that makes total sense. So like, if you can have something, in a way, some of my courses, what a lot of educators will call backwards, because I give you templates and programs and stuff to get started with right away. So then when you're looking at that, you can kind of go, oh, I can now see why Simon put the program like that. There's a reference point to make it all make sense rather than just purely being knowledge dump. Because I know that feeling, right? When you've got like your favorite topic in the world, but you've got someone who's great person, very clever, but just very drab in their topic. And it doesn't matter how interesting the subject matter is, you're drifting.
Yeah, definitely. And some of the tutors are like that on my masters, man. They're so fucking boring, like monotonous. You know, like their tone and what they said, it was just so boring. But obviously, like if you're going to do an area of interest, then it's going to be fun, isn't it? And you're going to listen. But fuck, man, like biomechanics was fun, physiology was fun. What was boring? Probably. It was all good. It was all good. It wasn't much.
You don't want to call out. You call out your masters. You know, you've seen what happened to Jordan Peterson, right? He might get his clinical license revoked. You will just get your strength and conditioning qualification revoked. Chatting
They
shit.
can't do that to me. They can't do that to me.
Yeah, well, that's what Russell Brand said, right?
Oh man, that's fucked up, man. There's no smoke. There's no smoke without fire. You know what I mean? So.
Oh, I know this is a tangent. I know this is the fitness stuff, but I haven't chatted to anyone about this yet. Like,
What do you?
I don't know.
There's a lot of female followers.
He's also very obviously promiscuous. And I agree there's no smoke without fire. There's definitely something. But it's strange. Whether he's done it or not, it's strange. Because people, if he's doing this sort of stuff, people would have known and kept it quiet until now, when he's now sprouting a different message, which isn't popular. It now comes out. And in that it wasn't like someone that came forward to the police just then. Channel 4 were hunting. Like they decided to make the documentary first, and then started reaching out to these women, which is just, it's so weird. And it's again, it's looking more and more likely. You know, fingers crossed he isn't, because I don't want anyone to go through this. That Andrew Tate is guilty, but in some way, shape, or form, not for what they originally had him on. He's guilty of trying to get people to do TikToks, apparently. But it's just coincidental that it's like Hunter Biden gets away with it. Yet, you know, YouTube have immediately demonetized Russell Brand, which is, and do you know two people that are still monetized by YouTube? Cardi B, who famously came out on YouTube Live or Instagram Live saying that she used to drug and rob men, still monetized. So self-professed drug and robber. And then R. Kelly, serving 30 years in prison.
Yeah.
Like convicted, still monetized by YouTube. But Brand immediately. And the British government reached out to YouTube and Rumble and asked him to be demonetized. That's a massive overreach. So I don't know, man. It's
yeah.
like,
I think
regardless of whether he's done it or not, I think something bigger is going on. I don't think it's New World Order. I think it's he's not liked by the people in charge, and they found it in. It's like, oh well, now we can double down on him. It's like they found an opportunity, and it's a shark smelling blood. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, obviously I see the point in it about that. Like, you know what I mean? If they're doing that, then obviously that's wrong in it, and they shouldn't be allowed to do that. But they can because they got money, they got power in it, and they're in control. But the way I look at these things is I'm a bit more black and white. Like, you know what I mean? I'm just like, you know what? No smoke without fire. Whether it's one woman or 10 women, that you shouldn't have the right to do that, and you should be.
Agreed.
You get caught, you're going to get penalized. You know what I mean? That's it. Like you can't. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I generally think that if he has done it, you throw the book at him, right? As you should. Like, no one should have the right to do anything like this. No woman has the right to have any of these things happen to them. The thing I'm not so keen on the way the world is today is that we are much more in a world where we are guilty until proven innocent. Like, he's not been charged, let alone convicted, and
Yeah,
we've seen his career come down tatters. People are already thinking of him as a rapist. And I'm like,
yeah.
well, we don't know that yet. Like,
The
he
worst.
might be, and
Yeah.
and if he is, then go to prison, lose all your sponsorships. Fair enough. Oh, it's now put me on the tracking thing again when I put my arms up.
The worst thing
Um,
about that is, like, you know, for me, like, whether it's true or not, it's like putting yourself in that position when you're in that celebrity eye is just fucked up. Like, how do you put yourself in that position? You know what I mean? It's
well, he
fucked.
put
It's like,
himself in a lot of positions back in the day, right? He wasn't a well-behaved boy,
I know, yeah.
regardless whether he's not done anything criminal. He's certainly got a lot from his fame.
Mm.
He's probably not been
Yeah,
enough. And you sleep with that many women, you're going to piss off a few. I'm not saying necessarily he may have done stuff illegal, and I hope he hasn't. But if he hasn't, I can see him pissing off a few women to want to go. His opportunity. Let's get him. You know,
yeah,
it's not a nice thing for the women to do, but apparently thousands of women, right? Like, he's going to annoy somebody.
yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, but like circling back to the education front, because I think this is actually me calling an audible here. I think this is actually a good time to talk about this. So we've been talking for a couple of weeks now about we talked about length of range parcels last time we got on the call,
yeah,
and we talked about people sort of like misinterpreting studies. And obviously, I've seen this a lot to working with coaches and sort of piecing together the truth of these things. But it's been a long time since my undergraduate degree, and you've obviously done this a lot more recently. So, like, what is the things you see people mistake when looking at studies? Because people only read the abstracts. What are they missing?
Um, well, it's there's a lot in it. I think one of the biggest problems is different journals and different papers have impact values.
Okay.
And have you heard of that before?
No, I haven't. No.
So it's kind of like how good is the paper, yeah, like the journal, like, you know, the what's the word I'm looking for? Help me out with that word. What's the word?
Reliability? I don't know.
Reliability, and how many times has it been?
Accredited, essentially.
Yeah, you know, like cited, and credibility of that paper. That's like probably one of the main things, you know, like credibility of the paper. Yeah, like, and different some research papers come out and they're not credible, but then, you know, media use that study and then say, oh, look, 20%, you know, this, you know, is going to kill you. You know what I mean? When that's just not the truth. So I say, like, impact factor is important, and you can go online and just have a look what has high impact factors.
So will
You
that be
know,
written on a study?
no, that's just like it's like updated yearly.
So how will people
Depends.
find? Let's say they find that they go Google Scholar and they find aspartame is going to make your heart explode. How can people then go and check the credibility factor
So what?
of that
Not
study?
not not of that particular study. Well, first of all, they can check how many times it's been cited,
Mm.
right? So high citations means it's quite credible because a lot of people are using it in their research. But if they look at the journal and they type that journal into Google and say impact factor of this journal, and then it will come up with a list of how high that ranks on impact factor.
Oh, okay, that's really interesting, and because that's always been the biggest problem for me. Is right, you could look and find studies, that will fit anyone's narrative. Like, and I hold my hands up, or I'm going to say hold my hands up because that will change my camera. But someone like Paul Saladino, controversial figure in the industry, I think he's the fitness equivalent of Andrew Tate in the sense of if you listen to him on short form content, he seems like a moron. But if you listen to him on long form content, actually he's very, very wise and very clever. Right? Not saying that for Andrew Tate, for all you Andrew Tate haters out there coming to get me. But Paul Saladino, we actually listen to him long form. He's very fair. He goes, look, I was having crazy autoimmune issues. I took vegetables out of my diet. I went carnivore, and it solved my autoimmune issues. I am now not carnivore, and I have about 300 grams of carbs a day through fruit and honey. And here's my blood work, and here's what I think. Here's the research to back up what I think. And he cites a lot of research. But again, if you look at that with an untrained eye, you go, oh, look, I'm not going to eat vegetables then, because Paul Saladino has put up 10 papers saying vegetables are bad for you. But you don't necessarily think, one, is he going into a study session going, I want to find research that supports me not wanting to eat vegetables, as opposed to research to the contrary? And then again, how credible is that research, I suppose, is the big thing. And I think that one of the biggest problems, it's more or less a problem of reading research here, but problems of how people's trust in people online, is that rather than looking at Paul Saladino's work and either going, he's an idiot, vegetables are good, I've read studies, because you're doing what he's doing, you're finding studies that suit your narrative, or saying, well, he's come up with 20 papers, so vegetables must be bad for you, and saying that's bogus. Understanding the answers somewhere in the middle. And the actual conclusion that you probably should draw is that you can get all the nutrients you need through organ meat, fruit, bit of honey. You can do it. You can be healthy without them. Does it mean you should go without them? No. But people look for the tribalism in studies now, rather than going, well, okay, whether I want to do this or not, what's the good I can take from this? Most people with a normal omnivore diet should also have some red meat, oily fish, and liver.
So what do you think of carnivore diet anyway?
On the whole, with the carnivore diet, I think it has its place. I don't think it's a long-term solution. I've known a lot of people that have used the carnivore diet and got rid of huge autoimmune conditions. And this is often down to, and it's not everybody. So some people think vegetables aren't bad for you because they all have defense chemicals and they're sprayed with pesticides. Like, a pesticide, while it's not a great thing, it wouldn't get on our plants without some level of approval. And we can go down a conspiracy theory route here of why we're trying to make people fat and weak and compliant. But let's put aside the bogus claims for now. You know, on the whole, it must have had to go through a massive amount of approval to be on our food, which means that the majority of people probably aren't going to be affected by them. As regards to defense chemicals on plants, it is 100% true that there are parts of a plant that we are designed to eat. The things that spread pollination. So big, bright fruit. Fruit is brightly colored for a reason, right? It's animals eat it. They will spread those seeds, and that's why the plant repopulates. So they want us to eat those bits, but they don't want us to eat the roots and the leaves. So they will have chemicals that would kill, let's say, a bee eating on those things. So that is 100% true. And does that mean that Paul Saladino is right? Yes and no. In the sense of there is some people are overly responsive to these things and cause issues to the gut, and a lot of people aren't. In the same way that some people are allergic to peanuts, and a lot of people aren't. So I think if people got autoimmune conditions, you tried a bunch of stuff, I think a carnivore diet has its place. I think you have two options then. You either then supplement with fiber and work on making sure that's in a good place, or and you make sure you have organ meat and stuff, so you actually are healthy. You're not calling out Michaela Peterson. She is much healthier after carnivore than she was pre-carnivore. Doctors are telling her people telling her she's an idiot. Like, well, you had 2 hip replacements by the time you were 20, and now you're fine. Like, regardless, who cares how she moves at 80? Right now, she has a quality of life which she didn't have. And you're telling her that all her life choices were poor. Shut up. Like that is arrogance personified in terms of studies. But I think if you either have the fiber supplement or you look in that time where you go carnivore, what can I do to heal the gut from the inside out? So can I work on my stress management? Maybe can I supplement with a little bit of glutamine? Maybe I'll start repopulating with probiotics, and then I start adding foods back in with digestive enzymes and see how things go. I know it's a long-winded sort of rant of an answer, but is that sort of answer?
Yeah, cool. What do you think? So, what do you think the risks are associated with a pure carnivore-based diet?
Well, the big one often is people's thought process on fiber, which is not. Again, I'm not anywhere near as experienced in reading research as you are, but from what I've looked at, it's not quite as clear cut. Fiber equals health, as we're necessarily led to believe. But also, I couldn't put my reputation on fiber doesn't equal health. It's like long term. Again, going back in the study thing, it's like long term research on anything. Really long term research in diet studies doesn't exist. It's a new science, and it's very hard to study someone for 80 years of life to see if they get colon cancer at 90. And this is a lot of the big argument against the carnivore diet is that we don't know. We don't know what these people are going to be like in their old age. We can just go, well, fiber, here's the benefits of fiber. Here's maybe the downsides if they don't have that. But most things, like certainly in the human body, most things have rerouting patterns. Like if carbohydrates are the primary fuel source for our brain, but we have ketones to refuel that. You know, we have aerobic metabolism and oxygen to make ATP through the Krebs cycle electron transport chain. But we produce lactate as a byproduct that can go through the liver to run glycolysis again. We produce more hydrogen ions to run glycolysis again. It's not efficient, but it'll work. So just because fiber equals potentially good gut health and no fiber doesn't necessarily mean bad gut health, there could be other pathways at play. Maybe the lower inflammation actually improves gut health. So it's, again, I'm going into some of the stuff about research studies, but it's tricky. But I don't think it's ruled out. I don't think it's done necessarily.
Yeah. No, that's good. Good information. You're spitting bars there, bruv. Jeez.
This is what I think Paul Saladino, where he's come to now, is actually a really good place. Because if you think Paul Saladino was full carnivore because it helped his autoimmune conditions, and he's done the right thing. He's worked on some stuff. He's looked at his blood work. He's looked at his lifestyle, and now he probably gets plenty of fiber through tons of fruit, and he gets loads of carbs through honey. He's very specific about the choice of foods, but he is now an omnivore. Now, I think you could certainly, if you went fruit, meat, organs, and then maybe like something to get your carbs into fuel performance. He chooses honey, and it's probably the easiest carb source. Like, you could be very healthy. I don't look at him and go, "You're going to die young." Not in the slightest. What do you think?
No, I think similar to what you said, man. Like, I think it's not for everyone, but it will work for a select group of people. I have a client doing it at the moment, and it's helping her hip pain. So she's feeling better. I always devil's advocate with her. Is it because you're consuming more protein? Is it because you've cutted a whole group of foods here and you're not having this and you're not having that? Is it just this? What effects do you think fiber, fruit, vegetables would have on this carnivore diet if you introduce some of them? Will it make it not as effective? There's always these questions that come into play. No, but you hit the nail on the head, like with what you said. I think, I don't recommend it for people, but if it makes them feel good, then fuck it. You know what I mean?
And this is the thing, right? As well, like sometimes we get so wrapped up on what's being right that we forget what right is dependent to the individual. So like if you've got a client that hates vegetables, and I'm not a huge vegetable person myself, right? But I eat them, not as much as I should. But it's one of those things where, like, well, let's say you try some stuff, right? So we nearly all universally agree that vegetables have some benefits. Whether the drawbacks outweigh the benefits, that's up to you, right? But we know they have some benefits. So okay, so we'll try what vegetables do you like? Maybe we'll try adding some ketchup on and easing the ketchup off. Maybe we'll try blending them up into our food. So maybe we'll go a greens powder. We'll try all these things. And if a client still is like, nah, I hate it, are they going to stick to better eating? very few coaches will try and hammer vegetables into them and go, well, how about I just go a slightly higher protein intake to manage hunger? And then how about I go, well, do you like mackerel and liver? And they go, yeah, no problem. Well, okay. Well, let's just do that. Because the benefits of a carnivore diet opposed to a vegan diet, which is mad, right? 'Cause we had a thing in Guildford on Sunday where it was a no roads day and the whole market out there, all the way down the main street. And it's entirely vegan. And no offense to anyone that's vegan, none at all. If you're vegan because of animal reasons, like you don't want animals to be hurt, or religious reasons, all power to you, and you can make a very healthy diet out of veganism. But this push to that veganism is the way forward for health and the climate, I'm not quite buying it. One, because the amount of methane gas produced by cows is considerably less than the synthetic products they're making for their clothes that are anti-leather, right? But I don't know enough about the environment and climate change to stake a claim on that. So if you disagree with me, feel free to make a comment. Happy to change your mind. But regards to a health standpoint, like, you could take vegetables out your diet and not be nutrient deficient if you eat oily fish and organ meat. You could not take meat out your diet and still get all the nutrients you need without supplementation. So you are deliberately giving yourself a diet that is actually subpar from a nutrition standpoint, unarguably, by veganism. If you want to do it, cool, we'll supplement it, we'll make it work. But we can't claim that this is the best thing for health. Luke Lehman, another shout out to Luke, always said in his early courses, if you make the most healthy vegan diet and stick a steak on top of it, it's probably the healthiest diet.
Yeah.
And like essentially the Mediterranean diet, right? Yeah. And so that's the big thing. That's why I struggle with the veganism versus carnivore, because vegans will come out loud and proud about how terrible carnivore is, and people will jump on the bandwagon because it's what is accepted in today's world. Whereas someone says they're carnivore anti-vegan, they are the fitness equivalent of David Icke. They are the conspiracy theorist. And I'm like, that's not true. Stan Efferding, right? You know who Stan Efferding is, right? The vegan, not vegan rhino. Why do I call him vegan rhino? He's the rhino. It's because my friend Ryan, I called the vegan rhino because he was jacked and vegan. He's not vegan anymore. But, which talks about my point. But the Stan Efferding, right? He has the vertical diet, which is basically a carnivore diet with a bit of spinach and a bit of fruit. He's closer to carnivore than he is to vegan.
Yeah.
And that's probably my favorite diet of all, to be honest. Yeah. People wanted to stick to it. So yeah, I think, again, and that's just nutrition research, right? I think the other side of this coin as well is hypertrophy research. Because I think hypertrophy research can be very, 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 very flawed. And before I give my take on this, what is your take on hypertrophy research? What are the strengths of it? What are the weaknesses of it? And do you think we should be listening to it?
Well, first of all, training studies, whether it's strength, power, hypertrophy, they're very, very difficult to do because you need, a lot of participants. You need to keep the variables down. So the methods need to be really, really controlled, the methods need to be good. And that's where that's where they're not as great, right? Because it's very hard to get a group of people that are committed and they're going to stick to this thing for, 8, 12, 16 plus weeks. We know hypertrophy ain't going to happen in one day. 4 weeks, 8 weeks maybe. 12 weeks is long term, isn't it? So that's the biggest problem with hypertrophy studies, participants, time available, and controlling all those variables, isn't it? So I think that's the biggest problem with them.
Yeah, I agree. And then if you delve that a little bit further, right, you are struggling, and I've been there, right. I'll tell you a story before this. I think I probably told this to you before, but I did my dissertation on creatine monohydrate, and it's the effects of creatine monohydrate intermittent sports tasks. And this is where life gets in the way, right? So I had my study, had my participants ready to go, and then my uncle passes away, and they give me an extension, which I'm very grateful for. But that means that all my participants now, in my extended time, are now on Easter holidays. So I now had to get a whole new bunch of participants. bringing my sample size far down, which is another problem with studies, right? Where the sample size is so low, can you really say X equals Y when you've studied 3 people, right?
Mm.
And so I was pulling in favors. So I was doing their study, they were doing mine. And then long story short, I did a study where I had to exercise to exhaustion in the heat. So there's a big humidity chamber.
Ooh.
And I was sitting on a bike for like 2 hours, 2+ hours, right?
Okay.
And the goal was like, what does the effect of a carbohydrate mouthwash have on exercise exhaustion and heat? So I come in, just like no drink, had a water mouthwash, cycle to exhaustion. Week later, come in, cycle to exhaustion in the humidity chamber with a Lucozade mouthwash. Couldn't ever swallow anything, just a mouthwash. So I was like, okay, so what are you measuring other than time to exhaustion? Okay, we're going to mention blood glucose, like see like how much the mouthwash affects your blood glucose levels. So I had to have a little finger prick injection every 15 minutes, which again wasn't pleasant on an uncomfortable seat.
Yep.
And then he went, we're going to measure core body temperature. I went, and how the fuck are you going to measure that? Out comes this thermometer. So I'm sitting on a bike with a thermometer up my ass, getting injections every 15 minutes. Like, this is the stuff I have to do to get people on my study. But it just shows, like, we sometimes look at studies as these all-encompassing, like, these people are always willing to help out. Their whole life is dedicated to learning if bench press is the best exercise for pec hypertrophy. And in reality, these people have got wives and families, lab equipment breaks, things change. And you now start to go, oh, actually, this might not be as sort of like all-encompassing as I thought. So, like, and as you said, we need to get people that are willing to do it for 12 weeks. Yeah. Who are people that are willing to do hypertrophy studies for 12 weeks? People that really like training.
Yeah.
So you don't really get true beginners in long-term hypertrophy research. And you don't get advanced people often in short-term training studies because they don't want to fuck with the training for the sake of one hard training session.
Yeah.
So you now get this massive data skew of where there's a caveat to everything.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Like with subjects' experience and all that sort of stuff. You know what I mean? Like when I did my study for my masters, I did it on cluster training, the effects of 2 different cluster training protocols over 8 weeks on maximal strength and power. So I was monitoring. We did 1 rep max testing pre and post, and every single rep of every single set twice a week, 25 reps. I tracked barbell velocity, so barbell speed. And like, I was lucky enough to have 20 participants for that. But for me to get 20 participants, they all had to be males. They all had to be between a certain age group, and they all had to be advanced levels of squatters. So they all had to be able to squat in the research 1.5 times their body mass. Okay, that would put them into, yeah?
Yeah,
so,
that's massive.
So although I had a short amount of subjects, how I ran my study and the way I analyzed the data had a good effect because it's a particular group of people. You know what I mean? So that's what's not done enough. That's what's not done enough.
Exactly that. And again, like imagine if you were just trying to get that in general, the effects of a cluster training overall, if you had less specific parameters. Just by doing cluster training and having to do 1 rep max testing, you've already taken out every beginner. You've already now can't really test people that are, that aren't skilled in these lifts. Yep. So you're never going to know of cluster training how that would work on a beginner because a beginner's not safe for it to do that. And this is the context and the nuance that you get with coaching. It's like, right, I know what the research says, but you ain't doing that. And like you see people that often get called out, like John Meadows intra-workout supplement stuff and a lot of Charles Poliquin stuff. Now, is some of Charles Poliquin stuff over the top and the method to sell supplements? Sure. Has a lot of Charles Poliquin stuff research caught up with him 20, 25 years later? Most definitely.
Mm.
So there's a merit to sort of just doing things, and the people often 20 years, because research is also, and this is a big thing for people to understand, is research is about 10 to 20 years out of date. So if something's found out now, you need to gather enough evidence on that thing before it's now publicly put out to the world. Understandably, fair point. But it does mean that good research, we don't hear it until it's already 15 years old. So now we have if there wasn't people willing to test the boundaries, if there wasn't people willing to disagree with that, we'd never get the results that we've had. So you've got to, again, a shout out to Luke Lehman today. My God, he always says that he's not evidence based, he's evidence informed. And I generally believe that we should use the research to guide us. But if you understand the pathways, you understand the signs, you can make your own decisions. And like, there's a reason why your masters, yes, they're backed by research and studies, but it's the reason why you went into physiology. Because in order to make scientific hypotheses to do new studies, or to be able to take those studies with a pinch of salt and critically think, you need to understand a layer deeper. There's no study, well, there is, but like, there's no real studies anymore of learning how ATP metabolism works, right? Like, you're just learning a bunch of studies that were done 50 years ago, and then okay, cool, this is just accepted knowledge now, that now allows you to be able to take a study and go, yeah, I get it, but this is the problem. And this is what I feel a lot of coaches don't know how to read studies and don't know how to interpret it, and maybe take it too much at face value.
So, like, for anyone that's a coach and listening, that's a good point. Like the first thing you look at in a research study would be the what's it called again? The abstract. The abstract would give you a quick general idea of what they did and the outcome and the results. Yeah, like, the outcome. But if you want to learn a little bit more about what they're doing and why they're doing it, then just go through the intro, because it will have all evidence-based information about, if you're looking into something about melatonin, and sleep, whether it helps you sleep. So that whole intro will be helping support the study on why it needs to be done. So, okay, so the study is going to be the effects of 50 grams of melatonin on males over a 7-day period, whatever. I just made that up. So the whole intro is going to be about melatonin, the effects of melatonin, the issues that men have with sleep, maybe why there's issues with this sleep. It's all going to be research based. So then the researchers would then present the hypothesis. What's the question? Why are we doing this? What do we need to find the answer out for? You can get a lot of information about anything in that introduction. And then they would present the method section, which is how they're going to do this. How does it look, And that's where a lot of people fail as well with the methods. Like, are these methods actually good enough? So we're talking about those hypertrophy studies. Yeah. Like, you can explain what bad methods would be in a hypertrophy study.
Yeah. Well, again, it's sample size.
Sample size.
Correlation versus causation.
Yep.
Are we, again, we potentially looking at, well, again, there's so many things with the methods. Are there outside influences taken into account? Long-term studies with nutrition, are we taking into account that everyone underreports their calorie intake?
Okay, so data and misreporting and things like that. So like data collection and all that shit, you know what I mean? Bias and so many things like
bias. So, that's a huge one.
So the whole point of good quality methods is to reduce the amount of variables as much as possible. Yeah. So if we take my study, for example, this ain't to gloat about it, but like, we only men, certain level of experience, certain level of squatting. They had to train twice a week. They had to be able to squat a certain amount of weight. Everything had to be controlled. And that would be a good quality study. And that's the problem with studies. They don't control for a lot of variables, but it's hard to do with normal people because people have lives, in it. You know what I mean? So, that's the problem.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And that's where people miss out by reading the abstract, because the abstract will just tell you the findings, but it won't tell you whether these findings are accurate. It won't tell you whether, like, do you think the industry is in a much better place, and it'll never change, if less people cited studies and more people cited literature reviews? So rather than Paul Sandin go, hey, there's this study that says vegetables are bad, and this person go, hey, there's this vegan study that says vegetables are good. If we go, here's a literature review that goes over 50 studies, 60 studies. If more people talk like that, I think people would have a better, less tribal understanding of the topic.
Yeah, 100%.
Because they're looking at and they're often written not like a study. So if you don't have to read a study, read a literature review. It's like reading an article.
And all that, 100%. But it still takes ages for people to catch on to that. Like, if you look at like melatonin, like, is it good for jet lag, things like that? Yeah, but I mean, there's there's reviews on all of the literature on melatonin and how effective it actually is, and some of it isn't as effective as we think. You know what I mean? How much does it help with sleep latency? Not that much. You know what I mean? So depends what you read, where you read it from, and you know what I mean. So
I think another thing with terms of hypertrophy research that's definitely worth bringing up is that very rarely we'll go, okay, is dumbbell pressing a better exercise for chest development? And they'll have this sort of like very generic statement. Or is squatting better for quads than a hip thrust? And we'll do this research. And we don't actually go, and again, this is down to sample size and you got to take what you can get. But there's things about, you talked about like the certain level of squatting and the skill level. These are all things we can account for. But something that's very rarely taken into account is structure. So, okay,
that's the worst.
Is squatting better for quad hypertrophy than a hip thrust? Or like for glute hypertrophy than a hip thrust, let's say, right? So, okay, well, that really depends. Because I'm going to load a squat more than a hip thrust. So that's going to create more mechanical tension that way. But for one person with a long tib fib and a short femur, that's going to nearly all be quad. But to your study, they squatted 100 kilos and didn't get much glute growth, and then the hip thrust got loads of glute growth. Whereas then this other person with big long femurs got tons of glute growth. I was like, well, same thing with bench press and rib cage. Lever length, deadlift arm, torso length. And these are things that are not taken into account. So if you take point blank going, this study said X exercise equaled X hypertrophy, is like, yeah, for who? For who? And this is the stuff that people don't think of. And this is why I think a lot of hypertrophy research is flawed, because you need to go, okay, I'll bear that in mind, but who is the individual I've got in front of me?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem with it. You know what I mean? It's not just trained and untrained or certain level of strength anymore. It should all those things need to be factored in. I mean, if you think about it in this simple way, right? Like if you did a DEXA scan or bioimpedance, any way of measuring body fat, lean muscle mass, what can affect that lean muscle mass day to day, hour to hour? What can affect that lean mass? Do you want to list them off?
Amount of food in your stomach, amount of sodium, water retention, whether you've trained, inflammation.
Yeah, well, let's say you did a DEXA scan, a true DEXA scan, and it measured how much lean mass you have. A liter of water will affect that lean mass. Carbohydrates, glycogen, it's going to affect that lean mass. So really, unless you're controlling for all of those factors as well with your hypertrophy studies, you don't really know if it's working, right?
And it's a trick that people used on calipers for years, right? Remember when Biosig was the thing? And everyone was like, my client gained 4 kilos of lean mass and lost 8% body fat within 3 weeks. I'm like, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. You did his first measures, depleted as fuck. You gave him a low-carb diet for a couple of weeks, and then you carbed him up to the gills the day before the next thing, so he filled out. And now you're saying that the lean mass has gone up. They haven't got any muscle.
Yeah.
2 weeks of a low-carb diet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and listen, I've got photos of my clients doing that. You know what I mean? It's marketing,
playing the game.
But at the same time, I've got an autistic boy who is putting weight on, and we need to control his weight. He's going to doctors tomorrow to do a weigh-in, and he hasn't really changed his diet. We're still working on simple basics, and I know what he weighs because I've weighed him here. But tomorrow, if his weight hasn't gone down, he's going to be upset. So I said to his mum, listen, feed him this today so that when he goes into the doctors, he might be a couple grams less. And then for him, it's motivation. So depends who you're working with, isn't it?
Well, and then that brings us to the key point of today, right? It's like, use research to inform your decisions, but they don't get so caught up on being right that you forget who you're working with. Like, yeah, what is research perfect for one person isn't for the other. And to go, right, let's look at this person. What's this person's structure? What motivates this person? What drives this person? Because, like, we can talk. I've done my lectures recently on hypertrophy, and the biggest thing when it comes to hypertrophy Gen Pop is that, well, do clients actually want to gain muscle, or do they just want to not get fat? So you can build this perfect hypertrophy plan, whatever that is. I mean, looking at all the research of what's best for hypertrophy, and the client gets bored in 6 weeks and he goes, sod this. And this is why, like, and putting aside people like Callum Raystrick and Jordan Peters and people that are coming out with this hypertrophy research. Well, a lot of coaches look at it and go, right, these are the guys that know hypertrophy, these big bodybuilders. Yeah, but they work with big bodybuilders who like training that way. So yes, you can do that. I find with Gen Pop, the people who get the most muscle mass on general population are people like you who are strength coaches. Because is it the most perfect program for hypertrophy? Maybe not. But I tell you what, for a client that's not really bought into just doing everything it takes to gain size and not happy getting a bit softer, if they can see the weight going on the bar, if they can look at a periodization plan going, this is where we're going to be, this is when we're going to change, this is when we're going to peak, this is the periodization we're going to do, you can then start to go, your client goes, oh, this is fun, I'm enjoying this, I wonder where Steve's going to go next. And then over a year, you'll get that guy stronger. Now, is it as much muscle mass as somebody who really focused on mechanical tension, all the stimulus? Maybe not. But more often than not, I reckon the client would have bailed on that second plan unless they're already into bodybuilding, whereas you've kept them engaged. And if you put more weight on their squat, their legs will be bigger. I'm not going to say what part of the legs because it depends on the structure. We're learning. But their legs will be bigger. And I think, again, is that the most scientifically perfect plan? No. Is it the right plan? Hell yes. Hell yes. And if you get a client that loved bodybuilding, I absolutely trust that you could write an amazing bodybuilding plan. But like, what are you got in front of you?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point, actually. And I agree. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, hypertrophy and general strength goes a long way, or general strength work goes a long way. You can pretty much, by using general strength methods, like simple hypertrophy methods, simple strength methods, simple periodization methods, you can get someone in really good nick.
Yes. Look, again, oh my God, Luke Lehman today. But he said something to me the other week, and he was like saying, like, well, what is optimal? Right? Define optimal. And it's amazing when you ask someone that question. Because I was saying,
I was going to say that, like, those bodybuilders, they're looking for. I know
it's not a great word,
optimal,
but I just found myself saying it. He was like, what is optimal? And then he was like, well, you're saying that proximity to failure and most mechanical tension is the most optimal thing for hypertrophy. I'm like, well, yeah, okay. Tell that to a Chinese weightlifter. They never go close to failure.
Yeah.
They do a lot of strength for a lot of reps. I'm like, never go proximity to failure. You're going to tell them they're not big enough? And I stopped. Well, I wouldn't tell them they're not big enough. They'd eat me alive.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. Like this,
it's going to count.
And again, it's, what I mean? There's many ways to skin the cat, man. Many ways to skin the cat.
Exactly. I think that's a good way to call it there. I think it's been a really, really, really interesting episode. So, before we go into the main stars of the show, we might as well say it because I've mentioned it about 7 million times. Go and follow at Muscle Nerds Health and at Luke Lehman on Instagram, because clearly the guy is doing something right, because I've quoted him about 18 times this hour. But Steve, right, you're on a mission to get your first 1,000 followers on YouTube, man. You've leapfrogged me.
50% of the way there. I've got 530 subs, man.
There we go. 53% of the way there. So we need 47% to get Steve, right? So everyone go and follow Steve on YouTube, which is, what's your?
Stephen Collins Training.
Stephen Collins Training. And then to find you on Instagram, where we at?
Same thing, man. Stephen Collins Training. Same thing.
Simple and effective. So by the time people listen to this, we have opened our doors on SMU. So follow me on @Kingsley on Instagram to find out more about that. If you don't want to find out more about what I do as a business and you just like to hear me chat shit with Steve and Rob and any guests that come on, then go and follow me on YouTube @Simon Kingsley Dutton. There'll be way less pictures on there because this podcast is a passion project. It's not a business thing. If you want to come through here and learn from me, be my guest. But I've deliberately not making this a plug. Why? Because if I want to talk about aliens, I can talk about aliens. I want to talk about Russell Brand and conspiracy theories, I can have an interlude in the middle of a show talking about Russell Brand and conspiracy theories. So if you want random shit, follow me on YouTube. Rest of it, follow me on Instagram. Steve, been a pleasure as always. I'll catch you next week.
Cheers, bro.
Thank you for listening to the Self-Made Podcast. If you like me and enjoy binge watching podcast episodes, click here for our latest episode. And if you want to stay in touch and find out when the latest episodes go live, click here to subscribe to the channel.